too late. You are the Israelites, and God gave us these laws, statutes, and commandments to live by before we leave this earth. You have to wake up and come back to Him. You understand?
Hi guys, and welcome back to the Truth Speaker TV. Today we have a very interesting video for you guys. It's educational. Let's get into the video.
Welcome to our channel. Today, we're diving deep into a topic that has caused much confusion and debate. Are the Transatlantic Slave Trade and Israel's Egyptian captivity the same events? So let's debunk this myth once and for all. Let's start by getting our cosmic timeline straight. The Israelites' time in Egypt is believed to have happened between the 18th and 15th centuries BC. That's during the Bronze Age, an era of chariots and early civilizations. Now, fast forward to the Transatlantic Slave Trade, which took place from the 16th to the 19th centuries AD. This period saw the rise of European colonialism and the horrific exploitation of African people on a massive scale. We're talking about two vastly different epochs in human history. Imagine comparing the first moon landing to the invention of the wheel. The social, political, and economic landscapes of these two periods were vastly different. The very notion of slavery itself had evolved over time. To truly understand these events, we need to view them through the lens of their respective times. Let's talk about the duration of these events. The Israelites' Egyptian captivity is said to have lasted about 400 years, but the transatlantic slave trade spanned over 3 continents and lasted for centuries. Over 300 years of forced labor in the Caribbean, 246 years in the United States, and over 400 years in South America. Generations of Africans were born into slavery, lived their entire lives under its brutal yoke, and died never knowing freedom. The sheer scale of the transatlantic slave trade is staggering. It's a dark chapter in human history, a testament to the depths of human cruelty and greed. While the Israelites' captivity was a time of suffering, it's crucial to recognize the vast difference in scale and duration compared to the transatlantic slave trade. One was a period of forced labor endured by a specific group of people. The other was a system of chattel slavery that spanned continents and fueled empires. Let's talk about the people who were enslaved. The Israelites were a specific group, the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The transatlantic slave trade involved the enslavement of millions of Africans from various West and Central African nations. These were diverse peoples with their own cultures, languages, religions, and histories. They were ripped from their homelands, separated from their families, and forced into a system designed to strip them of their identities and humanity. Imagine the vast tapestry of human experience represented by those millions of souls. To equate the enslavement of a specific group to the forced migration and enslavement of millions from an entire continent is to diminish the unique suffering of each group. We need to remember that we're talking about real people here, not just historical abstractions. Each group deserves to have their story told, their suffering acknowledged, and their resilience honored.
Along the Gulf of Guinea lies one of Ghana's most famous attractions, Elmina Castle. While the centuries-old structure is as grand as its picturesque surroundings, the castle itself is home to one of the darkest chapters in history.
This is the door of no return, where all the captives were made to go through before they get to the ship.
Never to return.
Never to return.
It's a reminder of hundreds of thousands of lives lost and generations of enslavement.
When slave trade began, it was reduced this way. Say that one person comes in at a time.
One at a time.
Yeah, consider that as people were separated or divided, they can easily be controlled.
Controlled and counted.
That's it.
A story that forever shaped Africa and continues to be told today.
We have to move away from the perception that, history is about the past. History is about people who are dead and gone. It is our story. If we don't tell our story, somebody will tell their story.
These are Ghana's slave castle. Perched above the vibrant fish market sits a fortress built in 1482. It's one of the earliest European trading settlements in West Africa.
Elmina was built by the Portuguese. It was the headquarters of the Portuguese slave trading activity in Western Africa. When the Dutch took over, they remodeled the building, they made changes. So it was the headquarters of the Dutch slave trading activities in all of Western Africa.
Built over the course of more than 3 centuries, Elmina Castle commands a majestic view of the sea. Transformed from castle to prison, the whitewashed building housed the captured Africans.
When they get in here, the first has to auction them, examine them. Normally, they want the healthy, captives. So first they have to count. They have an instrument that they use to open their teeth to count the number of the teeth that they had. In some cases, they have to be whipped for them to jump, for them to see how strong that they are. They were then put in the various dungeons. Now, remember here, we have the female and then the male dungeons. So they don't put them together for the sake of procreation or something like that.
Taking visitors through storerooms converted to dungeons, tour guide Alex Aful retraces the grim journey of the captives.
Before the ship come in here, the people would like to identify their goods, get them on board, so they would decide to brand them. Now, with the branding, each merchant has its own way of doing it. Some will use alphabets, some will use numbers on the form of metallic stamp. They put it in the fire. Already, they have some oil on their body, prepare them for the journey. So they bend them on the skin, get this mark in there before they get in there. And then the woman, in some cases, were given tag.
After as much as 3 months in the dungeon, prisoners would transition from captivity to enslavement by passing through this final exit to board awaiting ships. A physical reminder of an unimaginable horror. It is known as the door of no return.
So here, that's the door that separates Africa and then to the rest of the world. It was also a bit wider and then later reduced this way. Say that one person has to go through at the time.
One by one.
One by one.
Never to return.
So when the ship came, there will be a small, boat in there to carry them. So all those captives were prepared to go, we're sending them through that door. So that's to give us an understanding that that will be the last door, that they are not coming back.
For nearly 200 years, tens of thousands of Africans destined for slavery passed through this door, shipped into an unspeakable future that would forever impact their families. Their descendants continue to return today, searching for answers.
Still, my God.
Let's dig into the reasons behind these two periods of enslavement. Why were the Israelites enslaved in Egypt? According to the biblical account, it all boiled down to fear. The Pharaoh saw the growing Israelite population as a threat. He feared their numbers and potential power, so he sought to control them through oppression. The Transatlantic Slave Trade, however, was driven by greed. European powers saw Africa as a source of cheap, exploitable labor. They needed a workforce for plantations in the Americas to grow cash crops like sugar, tobacco, and cotton. One was rooted in the paranoia of a ruler, the other in the cold calculations of an economic system. One sought to control a perceived threat, the other to maximize profits at the expense of human life. Understanding these motivations is crucial to understanding the dynamics of power and oppression that have shaped our world. Let's talk about how these two groups ended up in bondage. The Israelites initially came to Egypt freely, invited by the Pharaoh during a time of famine. It wasn't until a new Pharaoh came to power that their situation changed. This new pharaoh, driven by fear, gradually stripped the Israelites of their rights and freedoms, ultimately forcing them into slavery. The transatlantic slave trade was built on a foundation of violence and coercion. Africans were captured through wars, raids, and kidnappings orchestrated by both European slavers and African rulers. They were marched to the coast in chains, enduring unimaginable horrors along the way. Those who survived the journey were crammed into the holds of slave ships, facing disease, starvation, and cruelty during the Middle Passage. One began with an invitation that turned into a nightmare. The other was built on brutality, designed to dehumanize and commodify human beings from the start. Let's talk about the kind of labor these two groups were forced to endure. The Israelites in Egypt were primarily put to work in construction and agriculture. They built cities, storehouses, and monuments for the pharaoh, enduring backbreaking labor. They were also forced to work the land, cultivating crops and tending livestock. The transatlantic slave trade encompassed a wider range of labor. Africans were forced to work on plantations, cultivating cash crops like sugar, tobacco, and cotton. They were also forced to work in mines, extracting precious metals and minerals. Countless women were forced into domestic servitude, enduring abuse and exploitation. The transatlantic slave trade created a system where every aspect of African life was commodified. Both were horrific, but they highlight the different ways in which slavery manifested itself in these two historical contexts. Let's talk about the treatment of these enslaved populations. The Israelites in Egypt endured cruel oppression under the pharaoh's rule. They were subjected to harsh labor, denied basic rights, and their lives were considered expendable. The pharaoh even ordered the infanticide of Hebrew boys. The transatlantic slave trade was marked by a level of brutality that is difficult to comprehend. Africans were subjected to unimaginable horrors. From the moment of their capture to their deaths on plantations, they were beaten, tortured, and murdered at the whim of their enslavers. Families were torn apart, and women were subjected to sexual violence. Both were systems of oppression that inflicted unimaginable suffering, but the scale and scope of the brutality in the transatlantic slave trade are difficult to overstate. Let's talk about the role of divine intervention, or lack thereof, in these two stories. The Israelites' captivity in Egypt is framed as a test of faith, leading to their deliverance by God. According to the biblical account, God raised up Moses to lead the Israelites out of bondage. The transatlantic slave trade, however, offers no such easy answers. While Christian abolitionists played a crucial role in the fight against slavery, there was no singular miraculous event that ended this barbaric system. It took centuries of struggle, activism, rebellion, and war to dismantle slavery in the Americas. One story offers the comfort of divine intervention. The other forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that we are responsible for our own liberation. Let's talk about how these two periods of captivity came to an end. The Israelites' exodus from Egypt was a dramatic event. Led by Moses, they fled Egypt, witnessed miracles, and crossed the Red Sea. The transatlantic slave trade ended gradually through a long process of abolition. It began with individual acts of resistance and gained momentum through abolitionist movements. It culminated in legislative action, with countries like Great Britain, the United States, and Brazil outlawing the transatlantic slave trade. One was a sudden, miraculous break from bondage. The other was a long, hard-fought battle for freedom. Both are testaments to the human desire for liberty. Finally, let's talk about the aftermath of these two historical events. The Israelites, after their exodus from Egypt, went on to establish their own nation. Their story became a foundational narrative in their culture and religion. The legacy of the transatlantic slave trade is far more complex and enduring. The descendants of enslaved Africans continue to grapple with the legacy of slavery and its impact on their communities. They face systemic racism, discrimination, and economic inequality. Their struggle for equality and justice continues to this day. Both remind us that the past is never truly past, and that we have a responsibility to learn from history's mistakes. In conclusion, while both the transatlantic slave trade and Israel's Egyptian captivity involved forced labor and oppression, they were distinct historical events with different causes, peoples, and consequences. Understanding these differences is crucial in debunking the myth that they are the same. To equate these two events is not only historically inaccurate but also minimizes the unique suffering of each group and diminishes the ongoing struggle for racial justice faced by the descendants of enslaved Africans.
Okay, so just to recap, there are some key differences between these two events. These two events are not the same. The Egyptian captivity was a biblical event that occurred in ancient history, before Christ, while the transatlantic slave trade happened in modern history. The Israelites were enslaved in one country, Egypt, whereas Africans were taken across the Atlantic and enslaved across multiple continents. God directly intervened in Israel's deliverance, while abolitionists and political movements ended the transatlantic slave trade through human efforts. So, what do we learn from this? Though both events involved forced labor and oppression, they were separate historical occurrences with different causes, different people, different consequences. The transatlantic slave trade is not, I'm going to repeat it, it is not the event described in the Bible regarding Israel's captivity in Egypt. And you can check out my other video on that, right? I just pray and hope that this video brings clarity to those of you who are still confused out there. When you know the truth, no one can deceive you, right? So empower yourself with the truth. Know who you are. Don't let Satan fool you. I believe what is even more heartbreaking about this situation is that there are Black people out there who wrote books, made quite a chunk of money, right? Misleading other Black people into believing that they are the children of Israel. The Bible said to test every spirit, right? Not everything someone puts in a book is golden, right? Test it against the Word of God. And the Word of God clearly states that us, Black people, are not the children of Israel. We are not. It's there. And some of them are just using a verse over here, a verse over there, and using that as justification to say, aha, yeah, we've been in slavery for 400 years. Two different situations. Has anyone stopped to check the timeline? It's important for us to know our history. And I know a lot of us were searching for our identity. Well, we are Black people from the continent of Africa. Some of us were some of our ancestors were captured, sold, whatever it is. But they left the motherland, Africa, and they went to different continents, right? This did not happen to the children of Israel. They went freely into the land of Egypt. Joseph, he invited his dad, Jacob, and they came with his brothers and everyone else. And, Israel grew into a powerful nation in Egypt. And it's in the Bible. So don't be misled. Don't let these people fool you into believing you are something that you're not. We are Black. We are descendants of Africans who were taken from the motherland. And that is it. Which is our tribe? We don't know. Which specific parts we came from? We may not know. But what I know we're not is the children of Israel.
Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more insightful content.